Hello to everybody out there listening to the Better People, Better Business podcast. Today, I am ever so fortunate to be sitting virtually with Mr. Simon Dowling. If you haven't heard of Simon, I'm deeply disappointed, and you should, and you will. He's an amazing individual who I've known for some time now, and is someone whose company and conversation I deeply enjoy. You kind of go, well, great, I'm glad you like him, Andrew, so tell us about Simon. So Simon's strength is around leadership and teams. He's an expert in that space, and he has a passion for helping teams to harness their collective potential. He's a speaker, he facilitates and he coaches, and he works extensively with leaders who want to help their teams truly hum. And I can see that. The organizations who engage Simon are hungry to develop a culture where people are empowered to do their best work. He's got clients that include companies such as Car Sales, Seek, Integral Diagnostics, Mercedes Benz, Redbubble, and Medibank. Some pretty big ones, and Medibank kind of relevant when we're podcasting this at the moment in the media.
Yeah.
Simon is also the author of Work With Me, How to Get People to Buy Into Your Ideas. It's a practical guide to influencing and leading without authority, which is a central idea to Simon's philosophy of modern leadership. He began his career as a commercial lawyer. Sorry, Simon. But his real passion for teaming was born out of his experience as an improviser. Now, for those like me who are old enough, you will remember this. He trained and performed for many years, including in Working Dog's hit TV show, Thank God You're Here. That's where you know his face from if you're watching on the video. It's an absolute delight to have you here, Simon, and thank you for taking the time to share with us.
Thank you. Thank you, Andrew. That's a beautiful introduction. Pretty well memorized. Yeah.
Straight off the top of my head. I know everything. Wouldn't be to do anything with a piece of paper or document.
Your research team is exacting.
Oh, they are spot on. I get to work with some of the best people. I really do. And you can tell this will be one of those podcasts/videos, if you're watching it, that'll be full of healthy banter. Simon and I, when we do get together, are normally relatively nonsensical but useful. So hopefully that will play out today in a beautiful way, as it always does.
Well, the sentiment of looking forward to this is one I definitely share.
Yeah,
and I guess we just have to remember there is an audience for this. It's not just you and me.
Well, but yeah, right. Okay, good. Thanks everybody who's listening in. And everyone knows who does regular listening. It's the first time. We're glad you're here. Reach out and say good day. But the way we always start, Simon, is a really simple question. So this podcast is Better People, Better Business. When I say those words and the experience you've had and the work you do, what does that trigger for you? What does that mean to you? If I was to say, what does Better People, Better Business mean to you, Simon?
The word that comes to mind is together, because and you touched on it in the intro that you just gave, which is my obsession. Really, the thing I'm most kind of fascinated by is you can have a whole bunch of really good people in your team, in your business. They are brilliant at what they do, they're talented, they're enthusiastic, they're experienced. But once you put them together, you don't necessarily get the kind of possibility of bringing those people together. And so when I think of better people, better business, I think of better teams, better business. And that's that, the term that you touched on is collective potential. And I think that's what I mean by that, is how do you unleash that so that, in fact, the sum of the parts, to use the old saying, is indeed greater than the whole.
1 + 1 = 3 mathematics.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think there's some subtlety in your word together. You say it's about bringing people together. So there's obviously the conversation around co-location, and we've had some complexity that most of us noticed over the last few years about togetherness being a little more challenging. But knowing you well enough and knowing how some of your work, together isn't just about showing up in the same place, is it?
No. It's an energy thing. It's a connection thing. It's I think the fascinating thing about organizations and companies is that, and we don't talk about this very often, right, is that you come into your role, you come into your job, you might meet a couple of people as part of the process, but fundamentally, from the day you start, you're part of a team with people that you didn't necessarily choose to be part of a team with.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like day one is getting to meet all the people that you're now going to spend almost every hour of your waking life with, whether you're doing that in person or virtually or both. And the implicit mandate is, so find a way to get on, and not just get on, actually create some magic together. And hopefully you don't hate each other. So I actually reckon this is the bit that we miss quite a lot, which is, how do you put a bunch of strangers together, slap a label on them that says you're a team now, but actually help them to work out how to become a team, which sometimes even begs the question, should we have slapped that group of people together? Like you get more and more, I think, you sort of see people talking about in interviews, we're interviewing for cultural fit. And that's a double-edged sword itself.
Yeah.
But I suppose that's an indication of where we're thinking about, okay, how well is this person going to play as a team member? But I would like to see teams and organizations go even a little bit further to really test out the suitability of this person or this group of people to be the team that we need. Because I think the teaming thing is critical to what most organizations are trying to do now and going forward.
Yes, I'm just teaming leads to teaming. You can play with two E's or one E. But yes, it's an interesting. Sorry, we just.
No, I'm with you on that. Like, I want an organization that's teaming with teams. Is that what you?
Yeah, absolutely. And teaming with the potential because they're teaming well.
Yes,
it is that piece that you're talking about there. Quick, write that down. Have we recorded this? Phew.
We're in the process of redesigning my website at the moment, so you're giving me just far too much to work with now.
Yeah, but it is an interesting piece. And when you say, like, again, because thank you for that. When you talk about the together piece, and you said it look, there's some great little pieces of wisdom there. People feel free to press rewind, give or take a minute and have a listen again. The piece around not just slapping people together and whacking the label teams on, but how do you actually get them, individuals or that collective, to function well? Your background in that, particularly in that improv world, where you did, people got slapped together, here's a theme, go get them tiger, and that was the game. But you wanted to do that. That was what rang your bell. In organizations, there's a whole stack of people who aren't so interested in whacking together. Here's your theme, go get them tiger. How do you help people deal with that? Because that's a really important piece, isn't it? It's a deeply uncomfortable, as you said, you're potentially spending a lot of, depending on how you're structured, whether it be virtually or physically, you're spending a chunk of your waking hours with this group of people. Significant.
It's a great parallel too that you draw with the improv background that I've got, because the parallel in that world for me was, you would sometimes get people coming to play improv with you, particularly if we perform in a comedy festival or something, and their background would be as a stand-up comedian. And so people would want to go and see them because they're a stand-up comedian. But their mindset around the performance was very different because they were used to having the mic to themselves.
It's me.
Their shtick, their jokes. And so it's almost like a look to the audience and waka waka, I'm doing my thing. And people would laugh at that. But often as an improviser or as an ensemble, I mean, we use the word ensemble in improv because, ensemble meaning together. As an ensemble, you'd sort of stand there going, okay, how do we have to look after this person, but now it's our collective responsibility to look after this kind of more lone wolf type player. But it's hard work because as improvisers, we would spend a huge amount of time. Like, you can't rehearse the show because there's no script.
That's the point.
Like, you're making it up. So what do? Just rock up on the day and hope for the best? Well, we would, and people would often say, when you have your workshops or rehearsals, what are you actually doing? Like, are you cheating? And it's like, no, what we're doing is practicing the skill of creating stuff together. So we're drilling, we're practicing, we're learning. But I think more than that, we're actually sort of developing between us a shared language of what good co-authoring, co-creation looks like. And so you'd have a mental model that you just immediately share around what are the key principles of, if we're going to work as a team, how to make this work. And there's some classic stuff in the world of improv that underpins, it's like a universal language that underpins the ability for sometimes complete strangers to step on a stage, but very quickly play ball. Things like, and probably the most famous is yes and, which is basically summarizing the idea that when someone says something, I say yes. Either I say yes or I act yes. In other words, yes, I hear your offer. I see what you've just done. And now I build on it. So we're never canceling each other out, or what improvisers call blocking. We're always building on each other. And then another one that's implicit in that is make your partner look good. So no matter what happens, the principle of improv is I will make you look good. Even if I'm berating and yelling at you on a stage because that's the scene and it's required, I will still, whatever you then do, I will make sure that you look good as an improviser in this. And so you're building that. You can see how critical that is to both, not just the co-authoring, but the trust that's required.
Yeah.
And I think, sorry, I'll just quickly, go back to your question. So how do organizations do that? I think that's what's missing for most organizations, is there's no language or principles that are learned, practiced, obsessed about, in terms of what does it actually mean to team, and then even further, maybe used as a screening tool to say who's up for this and who's not. Because there are some roles in this business where teaming is absolutely essential. So you've got to be up for it. You will be miserable. We will be miserable if you much prefer to work alone.
Yeah.
Or you don't like to share. So we've got to work on developing that. It's not enough to simply have a set of values and one of the values says teamwork or one of them says collaboration. Right, now we're done. Everyone's got that. It's not that simple.
No, and on a globally significant stage, characters like Jim Collins, good to great. I mean, that's one of the biggest premises he has, isn't it? The whole, there's a bus, your business is the bus, there's a bunch of seats, define the seats and make sure the right people are sitting in the seats. And you are right, there is this implicit or implied at times we go, well, of course they want to be here, of course they're sitting on that seat. And yeah, for teams out there, the subtlety, or not so subtle conversation that Simon had there was this piece around, have you actually had a conversation with some of your team to make sure they want to do this work, to make sure they want to be team? Because team won't be team unless everyone on the team wants to actually be there and do the work they do. I think I used team way too many times there, but it's okay.
Well, but it's, I mean, that's actually kind of cute, because I think that's what goes wrong in organizations is people use the word team all the time as if it's like, a group of people is a team. It's not necessarily. It's a group of people.
Yeah.
who came together in a room and all report to the same person.
And we see it best, I think, I love that. And I think one of the things we see, a best example of where that can be healthy or problematic is in sporting fields. And I'm sure you've used the analogy many times and even that one you talked about with the stand-up comedian versus the improv crew. But on the sporting team, the team of champions or a champion team, they're not really a team of champions. They're just a bunch of people who are really excellent individually, but they're a really crap team. Versus the people who truly want to function, and it is a champion team. They work on what it means to be team. Or in the improv / stand-up comedian, I love that imagery, and I can just imagine it. The stand-up who's so used to getting either lauded or laughed at or shouted down, whatever, but it's them.
Tomatoes thrown.
Yeah, it's all on them, and they love. That's where the energy comes from. But when they have to then integrate into this community, this team,
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm. And to be fair on that one too, because, and I think this parallel is important. I don't want to paint that stand-up comedian, for example, as, well, I love the spotlight. So, it's an ego fueled, like, gives me a buzz to be the performer. But there's actually, and this is very relevant to the business world or corporates, organizations, is there's this deep-seated mindset of it's my job to make this go well. And so there's this, if I have that mindset on a stage, and it's like everything that's happening, it's like, oh, this is not, they're not laughing yet, the audience, or it's not going well. It's my job to fix it. I become kind of myopic around what am I going to say next? What am I going to do? As opposed to, how do I help the people who are on this stage with me to make this amazing? And it's a very different focus, right? And it comes back to this question of where do so many teams maybe get this wrong, is I think actually this problem often just starts with leaders who assume it's their job to fix stuff and to make it go well. And so become obsessive almost, or that's their internal measure of success around, it's my job to fix this. Until I've fixed it or come up with a plan, I should just keep everyone doing their thing on their tools, just keep them busy. But in fact, in doing that, what we're fundamentally kind of doing is disempowering people from actually being the solution themselves. So you get all these leaders talking about, I want my team to be accountable. I want them to be empowered. Well, maybe the reason they're not is because you're so hell-bent on holding on to control until you've got a plan that they never can be a team. So they're just waiting for you.
And and the frustration the leader then often feels around, why aren't they? And the image I always hold of that one, Simon, and that's powerful. Thank you. The image I hold is, I think of the greatest American showman type thing, the circus, with the ringmaster, ring mistress, whatever the language said is, kind of, but the circus is going on, but they're in the middle going, I'm controlling it all. Well, are you? Or are you just in the middle with the spotlight making lots of noise while all the things happen around, and or no one will do anything until the person in the middle says do it, and you just debilitate the team even further and even further. And I think I would happily say that I have been in those places and I have led that way, and it is and I'm sure that there's many people out there listening and quietly going, yeah, you've been there, done that, and or might be still doing it. And that's okay.
Yeah, totally, because I am too. So if it's really interesting to sort of think, when are those moments when you stifle people's ability to actually just step on the stage and play, to bring their full selves to actually do some extraordinary work and almost just take ownership of it. And I reflect on, for example, those moments when I might be talking about a project or a task, or I might be, in fact, I had it this week. I was running a workshop where there was a point at which just people in the workshop, it was meant to be a workshop to come up with initiatives and next steps. I was the facilitator. And I have a moment that goes off in my head, which says, what is wrong with you people? Why don't you take responsibility for this? Like, stop being the shrinking violet in the room. Stop waiting for other people to take ownership. Like, take some ownership. That's the internal voice in my head. And then it takes me a little while to kind of like just sort of sit with it, take a break, reflect, and go, hang on. You never let them take ownership. You were so, as the facilitator of that workshop, you were so hell-bent on making sure the workshop went well that you just kept taking control, and you didn't allow enough mess. You didn't allow enough awkwardness. You didn't allow enough uncertainty in the room, because you kept trying to tidy it up. Like, I'm the greatest showman at that moment, wandering around going, oh gosh, don't let the audience feel awkward. Come back in and fix it and make it like it's all good. Whereas in fact, teaming does require being okay with just sitting with the chaos and the mess We're not in perfectly ordered lanes on a highway here, all driving and the traffic's flowing perfectly. And there's an emergency stopping lane. We're actually at that busy intersection, the roundabout in, I don't know, Vietnam, where that's the one I picture, where it's just, to my eye, it's chaos. But to their world, it's working beautifully.
It works. Absolutely. Yeah. Context. I think that's a really, really sage reflection that everyone should catch on to, is that if there isn't a level of messy and chaos and a little awkward, and I don't mean all the time necessarily, but if there isn't a level of that at different times, different places, you're probably not getting to where you need to get to as a team. Or as a leader, if you're not allowing that little bit of messiness, discomfort and awkwardness, and we're not talking about, throw them to the wolves and let them go, but there is that level where, because those messy times and the discomfort, the tension, I often say frustration is a beautiful thing. It's the birth of something, and I don't like being frustrated, have no doubt, it drives me nuts, but I also know that something's shifting or changing on a biochemical neural level. Pathways are forming, and that hurts. That's hard.
What a great way of looking at it, though. The flag that says, I'm feeling frustrated. What's happening in this moment?
Yeah. Where's the opportunity? What's going on? Why? How do I? And it's not about trying to find a silver lining on every cloud, but it is seeking to understand what might be happening here. And in team sense, especially when you're in the whole, we've all seen the beautiful forming, norming, storming, performing, and sometimes we throw that away a bit too lightly. But it's a real process that happens with people and with teams. And I think we hire somebody, we hire somebodies, we drop them in the bucket, and then we expect them to function and fit in and play well.
I'm totally with you on that. I think that, I'm going to go back and draw a parallel with the improv world again, which I'm only just thinking of as we talk about this. Because, if we assume for a second that great co-creation in improv is about the ability to for every individual to let go of being the leader, the lead, and that we're actually all kind of co-authoring here. We're co-leading, which means we're constantly taking cues from each other. And you think of that same idea in any kind of team. I think like teaming, playing as a team, harnessing collective potential is actually one big game, and I call it a game of what's possible. Like we come into a team meeting, who knows what's possible here? Well, we'll never discover it if we don't let go of the need to control every beat of this meeting. Slide decks, agendas that are so jam-packed that there's no room to just sit with a blank question or a blank sheet of paper or an idea and just go, so let's just open up this question of what's possible here. The reason maybe we don't get to that is because we don't do enough of the forming, if you go back to that Tuckman model. And the forming is, like in the world of improv, we spend all that time learning that language and those principles because they then become the guardrails of how we do this. So we want the freedom to co-create, but we need to agree the parameters and the rules by which we do that. And I think teams need to spend more time doing that as well. I think one of the biggest problems with teams is that they don't really have, in many cases, what I call a collective mission. They don't really have a shared, clear sense of what it is we are trying to achieve by working together as a team. Sure, I might have on a wall somewhere the organizational vision, which at least half the time is lame anyway, but it's like what's the meaning of why we exist, and what are we trying to do, and what's the absolute obsession in terms of our focus this next 90 days? Like, are we all clear on that and how each of us fits to that? So if we're not clear on that, it's going to be really hard to then step into a room and go, so now let's explore what's possible. Or if we don't have agreement on, so then if that's our collective mission, what are the most important principles by which we need to play, to actually design together this idea of how we roll. I talk a lot about, we've got to be clear together on how we roll as a team. Let's set ourselves some rules of the road if we need to, but they're the rules by which that will enable us to co-create. So you've actually got to spend this time setting yourself up for success. And I don't think teams do it because either feels like a distraction from the real work, or certainly in senior leadership teams, I think there's often a mindset that says, oh, well, we're all very senior here. We're all grown up. We're all adults. That seems far too basic.
Yes. It's yes, we're beyond that. We've done that work before. We're good now.
Yeah. So
yes,
not true. So not true. I call BS on that. So that's, I think only in recent times I've started to realize it's part of my work now to make sure people realize those sorts of myths or stories they're telling themselves about, what's already going to be fine is just not fine. And it's infecting whole organizations. People are leaving organizations in droves because they're going, I don't feel connected to the purpose of this place. My leaders don't even seem to understand it. They're not telling me a story that I can connect to. So I'm out.
Yeah. And there is that transitional people choose to leave organizations, go to another place, just trying to find home, trying to find what they consider to be something that feels more like home, whether they can align with the purpose, the mission of that entity. And I again happily say there's work to be done in my space. And I suspect everyone listening, most people would say, yeah, we can sharpen that one up. And what does that look like, Simon? If someone came, like someone's heard you say this and they go, yeah, look, that's actually, making me a little uncomfortable because there's some truth in here, Simon. And they go, hey, Mr. Dowling, I heard your stuff. What can we do?
Right. How do I go, well,
so there's two questions there. One, obviously, feel free to call Simon and have that conversation.
Yeah, I was going to say
get some wonderful outcomes, and I would encourage that deeply. But on the other side of it, for people just as they're thinking through in their own businesses, what sort of things should they be thinking about? What sort of activities or focus? Like how? Because it's easy for us to sit here on this and go, should be doing more teams, should be better culture, should be fixing stuff up. What's wrong with you lot? Get after it. And judgment passed, right? Thanks, have a great day.
Yeah.
What are there some pragmatic things that you kind of go, look, here's the things that I think about, or here's the thing I think I encourage people to think about when I work with them? Because I think even if people are going to work with you, and again, like I said, I'll keep encouraging that. It's always nice that they've started some work before you walk into a cold room as well.
Well, the question I would ask anyone who sort of listens to this kind of conversation and goes, yeah, I wish for something more for my team. I yearn for something a bit different. I think you've got to sit back and first of all ask yourself, why though? What is it that you are trying to unlock here in terms of that collective success? Like, I think the problem with this is teamwork has started to sound a little bit like something, it's like, let's fall off tables backwards and catch each other. And so it's been relegated to the world of like, oh yeah, that's the fun and fluffy stuff that we do, just to keep, people happy enough. But then we get back to business. And so for me, before I start any engagement, I guess the question I'm really asking is, how much does teamwork really matter? It's perhaps why I don't, I use this word teams that hum, but it's why I also use this term collective potential. Like, what really do you see the collective potential of your team being? Like, if we would work together, we would work together more consistently. If we were to hum, what would that unlock that you haven't already unlocked? And I think that's the conversation every team needs to have first, because there's no point starting the work unless there is a sense of there's value in this, because it actually is a bit of work. There's some effort required here. And part of my job is to think, how do I help organizations, or teams rather, set themselves up to do that work alone, like not to be dependent on people like me or consultants or coaches to do it. But there is some work to do. One of the activities I often get a team to do to start with is to actually talk about, for them, if I introduce this idea of teams that hum and teams that work really well together, when was your first great team experience? Just talk about that. Because what I think people often discover is, you know what? You've had team experiences of the kind I've never had. Like I would love to have been in a team like that. I never did team sport.
Mm.
The teams I was put in was kind of like we were the D division and we were all, none of us wanted to be there. I've only ever worked in kind of line management kind of structures. And I actually have realized I don't even really know what a good team feels like. Well, no wonder. You haven't even caught the team bug. So why would you want to, you don't even understand what possibilities look like. So when were you last part of that? Or what are the examples that you think of? Like for some people, it will be the sporting world. Other people in the room will go, oh, please don't talk about sport. So they'll talk about music, orchestra, community arts. They'll talk about their family unit. They'll talk about their last employer. Who knows? But actually just spending some time, first of all, going, what do we want from this?
Mm.
And I'll often, like if I work with exec teams, which is where a good chunk of my work lies, a big bit of time at the outset is me trying to understand whether, in particular, the CEO actually really gets what this is all about.
Mm.
Because otherwise what they're likely to do is say, so let's come together for half a day, fall backwards off tables and catch each other.
Yes, tick, I've done the team thing now.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can go back to the board or the collective and say, yes, done some team stuff.
Yeah.
Well
We
done,
should
CEO.
be good now. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll be good.
But then I think from there, what I, really simply, and we can dive into any of these in detail, but really simply what I say is a team needs to focus on 3 core questions to start with. And these are the core questions that help us build up kind of a shared picture of what we're here to do. And the 3 questions are focus, flow, and care.
Mm.
The focus question is, what are we collectively focused on achieving here? Like, why do we exist? What's our purpose? What's our ambition? What's that collective mission? What are the things that matter most right now? And how does all of each of us connect to that?
Mm.
If we can build up a picture of that we all understand, I'm constantly blown away how often teams in those conversations go, oh my God, I had no idea what you were doing. Well, no wonder you couldn't work as a team. So that's focus. The flow question is, and then if we are genuinely obsessed about that, how do we flow as a team? Like, how do we need to roll? How do we work together best? What do the dynamics need to be? Where are the interdependencies between us? How do we kind of help each other with that? What are the big problems each of us is facing, and how do we help support each other on that?
But we've got a bunch of PDs though that pretty clearly explain that stuff, Simon.
Do they?
Well, say we do. Let's say go into those hypothetical organizations that do. They do exist out there, I'm sure, but they do. And I'm not like, I guess this is the tension where some people go, but there's a bunch of PDs. People should understand, shouldn't they? And I'm playing with that. I'm not disagreeing.
Yeah, no, I'm sort of sitting here going, oh my gosh, there is so much in that. Like, yes. I mean, a great PD, a really good one, might start to answer that question. But like, if I looked at Andrew's PD, I might be able to see what Andrew's focus is on right now. But chances are Andrew's PD just describes what his role in very broad terms are when he first started in it. And in fact, it's out of date before he even began. So what I would love to know is, what are the 3 big things that are in your spotlight right now?
Yeah.
AD, how are they taking your time? But then in fact, that's only the first part, because what the PD won't answer and what your goals, KPIs, OKRs won't tell me is, where are the intersections, where are the interdependencies between us on that? And that's the stuff between the cracks that we're trying to discover as a team. And it's what teams often just, again, don't spend any time at all doing.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I just thank you for that. I think it probably helps a few people listening going, yeah, okay, understood.
It's an easy, I mean, I've had people, literally in teams, I get them to put it up on a sheet of paper, just show us your top 3 kind of focus areas at the moment, your top 3 initiatives or areas where your energy is, what they are, why they matter, what you're trying to get from them. And then I've had teams, I've given them string, and they've drawn bits of string between the posters to say, here's where mine intersects, or here's where mine interferes with that, or you interfere with me. And it's a fascinating exercise just to talk about that.
I'm sure it looks like one of those police TV show things with the,
The lasers,
lines go, or the strings where you see that wall of the person trying to track down the historical. There's just this connectivity everywhere.
The case map.
The case map, and it's because it does. If you think your organization doesn't have that, you're kind of kidding yourself, and you potentially are pretty ignorant, to be a little blunt, because it is absolutely going on underneath the hood right now. And because the line is not clear of joining that dot to that dot, and it's not negotiated or discussed, it's not, to use your word, there is no flow. It's geez, this is really uncomfortable. I'm not quite sure why.
And so again, it's the team's job to unpack that only once we've talked about focus. Like, you can't talk about flow till you've got clear on focus. We don't have a shared picture of success. And just to come back to the third element, because anyone who's listening will go, hang on, you said there was a third. Where is it?
Yeah, I was waiting for them. Just get hanging on there.
So I've talked about focus. I've talked about flow. The third is care, and care has a meaning that's slightly different from maybe what springs to mind immediately. It's not care for each other. That's a separate piece. It's critical, but the care here is the care for any of what we just talked about. So focus and flow. So what often happens in team workshops is people talk about focus and flow, and then they go, all right, that was a great conversation. Good to hear it all. Thanks, senior leader, for looking after this for us. Let us know what's happening next. And so what we haven't done is got to a place where we've worked out, how do we as a team share the care for this? Like, whose job is it to now make this happen, is the question I ask. To whom have you just made these commitments around focus and flow? Because the answer can't be to the boss.
Hers or his, isn't it? Up there.
Yeah.
No.
It's got to be, we just made that to each other, didn't we? Well, okay, so now things get tricky because you don't all have a one-on-one with each other. So you don't conduct each other's performance review. So how do we create a kind of accountability to each other here? How do you create a commitment to each other when none of the kind of classic institutionalized ways of holding people accountable don't apply here? And that's a really interesting conversation for teams to have. Like, do we have a cadence, a regular rhythm of conversations where we say, how did we do this week? How did we do this month? It's one of the great things of like agile working methodologies, for any of your listeners who are familiar with that, particularly born out of the tech digital software world. But the art of the retro regularly, the retrospective, enables them to ask these kinds of questions when it's done well. So not just how did we do on the project, but actually how did we perform as a team? It's what professional sporting teams do really well. It's what a lot of professional artistic teams will do really well, is actually obsess about how they're working as a team. So building that in is a huge step forward. So they're the three things. I call those the three alignments: focus, flow, and care. And if you can build alignment, radical alignment around those three things, fierce alignment, you've got a shared model.
That's very cool. Again, if you didn't catch all that, there's a lot of content there. Hit the old rewind button and have a listen.
And the other thing I'd be happy to do, I've got a visual that kind of captures that. And if any of your listeners want it, we can work out how to best get that to them. But
yeah, absolutely. And I suspect it's also accessed through your site and et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, totally.
Gladly throw something in the show notes below to point them toward where to find that, because I think that is a very elegant way to talk about what matters on that journey, the focus, the flow, and the care. And you can use a bunch of words, but those words work well. What's your focus? How do we flow? And flow is a good word. I think it's a more known word these days than it was 20 years ago, and people are comfortable with it. And care. And I like the way the spin there isn't about it. Of course, we care for each other, but how do we care for what we've just birthed here? How do we collectively keep this moving in the right way? That's a big question.
It is. And I think, what a lot of people might sit there and listen to and think at that point is like, oh gosh, I'm just not sure my team is invested yet enough. in each other to have that kind of conversation. We just need to build trust. We need to build this sense of connection. We need to decide whether, in fact, everyone's on the bus, to go back to that expression you used earlier, AD. And it's a tension, right? Because I say yes, and imagine the trust that can start to build through the conversations I just was outlining, because it actually is answering a really important question, which is, what are you asking me to trust in? It's not just people for the sake of people. It's people who have come together for a reason. And then at the end of this conversation, I'm going to feel more trusting of you or less trusting. Part of this work is I've got to get to know each other better as well. Yeah, sure. Absolutely. Spend time understanding each other's preferences, styles, quirks, histories, all of that stuff. We've got to layer that in as well. But I think it's a mistake to try and tackle that first just on its own. Let's have a trust building session. I think you've got to give us something to trust in first. And if the team doesn't yet have that, let's work on that.
Yeah, I think that's the interesting piece that you talked about and how your work occurs. So you're right, people can go away, do a half day, full day, whatever, trust workshops. And often, as you said, we play with it, and no disrespect to it, but going backwards and all that. They all adds value that can absolutely start to put in place trust. The question that I've always had, and you've just elicited it really well, is what are we framing that in? So there's a human piece, which is beautiful, and it's lovely to have that. But it should be the human thing and where the organization, the collective wants to head. If you can build trust in service to the mission, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
Because that's kind of where it's at. Like, we'd love our teams to trust each other more and to be more comfortable and affiliative. And how do we also get that same thing happening in service to clients, work, focus?
Yeah.
It's a really useful, really clever frame.
Looping back to the very beginning of this conversation, right? When people joined the team, they probably actually really just signed up for their PD, to go back to your thing. So that's what I signed up to do. And I knew there was going to have to be some teamwork along the way, but really the PD is where it's at. And what we're trying to do is shift from that and say, again, go back to Jim Collins. If we were to say you're either on the bus or off the bus, whose bus are you actually talking about? My bus, your bus, the boss's bus? It's like actually got to be our bus. And if it hasn't been built yet, like, what are we trying to do? You can't ask me to be on the bus or off the bus. I don't even know what the bus is. Where's it going? Who else actually wants to be on it? What's the level of commitment that the others are bringing to this? Like, there's so many questions. Oh my gosh, Andrew. Oh my gosh.
There's 6 leaders in the room, and they're all driving their 35-seat buses to wherever they're going.
Oh, well, this is what kills me about, and I think this is why it actually starts. It has to start really, if you're trying to do this as a cultural thing, it has to start with the senior leaders in the room, because the exec teams that just don't get this.
Sorry. Yes. I still remember a conversation, all names aside, of a client who reached out and said, Andrew, I'd love to do some work. The field-based team just aren't clicking. They need to do better. Excellent. So, tell me what that looks like. Yeah, blah, cool. So really happy to do that. But what I'd like to start with is your leadership team, to be able to understand. So you're clear on what it is you're doing, such that the exampling that's flowing through is aligned. No, you don't understand. We're good.
We are the role models.
We're good. Okay, that's lovely. And, because what we know is that leadership, the exampled, if they're having issues, that could be an echo of issues that you're not seeing in your own world. No, you don't understand. We're good. And it was an interesting process. In the end, we didn't do the work because my premise was, unless you're willing to do the work, I'm going to do the work for them. Like, it won't succeed. I'm not interested. Because someone will do it. That's awesome. It isn't going to be me.
Maybe a great question for a team like that, a senior leadership team. And I'll often ask a team this question as we sort of design the work is, what are the 3 things that this team does exceptionally well as a team that you would like to see every other team in this business do? What can they learn from you And then the next question is, if I went out and asked people in the business, rate this team on a scale of 1 to 5 on how they're going with this, what score would they give you? And I think that it makes teams nervous. And maybe that's part of the deflection, right? It's like, oh, please don't, we're the top team. We're supposed to have this stuff together. So please don't come digging into our closet.
Yeah. And yet we know more and more people, more broadly, and academia is talking to the Brené Browns of the world, the vulnerability piece, finally becoming a language that is okay. And it doesn't mean we're all weeping openly on a platform, but what it does mean is we can be a little transparent.
Yeah.
We can be a little honest that we don't have it all together, but we're on the journey. And so glad you're here as well.
Like, why can't an exec team be the first to say, geez, teaming is hard. Collaboration is hard. And we actually have probably, as a business, made it harder for ourselves. We set you goals and KPIs that weren't aligned. We don't reward you for collaboration. We reward you for performance on your deliverable. We spend all of our time in meetings that are just focused on stuff as opposed to understanding that collective mission. We don't prioritize and, in fact, expect people to forge connections and understand different people in this business. We don't value that as actually one of our most important assets, is people's understanding of the whole business. Your network is actually part of the way you create value. And it's not something that the competition can copy if we get that right. But no wonder it's hard, because we never actually have set up for that. And we on reflection, haven't done it particularly well ourselves. Imagine what a breath of fresh air that statement would be.
Yeah, I think most team, or the right people sitting in your organization, whether it's 5 or 500, would all kind of go, okay, righto, thank you. So what do you want us to do now? How do we go there? Because I think that's that openness, isn't it? It's to them, for those individuals to say, thank you. Thank you for not, it's the right word. Thank you for not acting like there isn't a problem, because we know there always is.
Yep.
There always is. There's always a challenge. It is hard work. Collaborating, I mean, it's an overused word as well. Collaboration probably 20 years ago became really popular, and everything was about collaboration, but no one actually learned around what does that mean? How do you do that well? And it isn't just about getting a bunch of people in the room and getting some post-it notes and sticking them all over the wall. There's a lot more work than that. And that is the hard work of the team, isn't it?
And I think as a result, for a lot of people, collaboration just means way too many meetings, being CC'd in way too many emails, being expected to build consensus on everything that I do. And, that's just the world. I mean, there's actually been some really interesting research over in the US around the whole phenomenon of collaborative overload, and how that has meant that those who are just naturally givers have burned out because they've been asked to give so much and they have no time to do the work as well. And those who aren't naturally givers are going, I'm not up for that. That sucks. And they're under collaborating. And so redefining it and understanding and getting really purposeful about it, I think is really critical. So getting intentional about this, having a shared roadmap for how do we, like my goal with teams is not to just, facilitator, I guess, comes in and leads a team through a series of questions and conversations and says, by the end of this session or by the end of this program, you will hopefully feel like a better team. My job is, I think, much more to say, here's the roadmap of what it takes to build great teaming. I'm going to help get you started. But the whole point of this is for you as a team to decide, how do you want to use this roadmap going forward?
Yep.
Because this is the science of teaming, and it's a structure and it's a shared mental model. And if you as a team choose to adopt this roadmap and you build yourself a rhythm of how often do we come back to and kind of look at the map and say, are we holding it up the right way? Where are we going well? Where do we need to put some more effort in? Then you're good. Then you're good.
That's really powerful. And one of the things I have said a few times in the past talking about collaboration and you talked about it there. For me, collaboration isn't coercive cooperation. Like
I love that term, coercive cooperation.
It seems to be this piece where it's you will cooperate.
Yeah.
Hang on a minute. That's not collaboration. That's a different conversation. There's a choice to make. If you want to do that, go for your life, but don't paint it with the wrong brush.
Yeah,
it's not that brush.
Yeah.
It's really significant. There's so many, like you said, and we both know, rabbit holes everywhere that one could choose to go down. But that was very useful for people. Again, focus, flow, care, and thinking about the energy it takes. Don't avoid it, but go into it with eyes open, in the sense that there's work here.
And as a result of that, come back to that first question that I invite a team to think about, which is, to what extent do we feel like we are actually choosing teamwork? Like, this has to be a choice. Collaboration should be a choice. Teamwork should be a choice, but not just as a general vibe or principle. Like, in all things, collaboration. In all things, teamwork. Like, oh my God.
Stop.
Yeah, just let me go to the toilet alone.
Yes.
It's actually more, where and when do we really need this to work, and why? And let's get clear on that value piece first, before we then ask ourselves, okay, so how are we going to go about it? It's a bit like, I sometimes use the metaphor of, it's like ice cream. If I love ice cream, I don't know. Do you like ice cream?
Look at me, Simon. Food, broadly speaking, yes. Seriously, come on.
Well, ice cream can be. I'm always surprised how often I come across people who say, "Oh, don't like ice cream."
I'm a savoury guy, and I'd also like good ice cream. So
there you go.
Lollies and stuff.
You can get bacon ice cream, apparently. So,
oh wow,
there you go.
Heaven on a stick, that one.
But it's like ice cream, because I walk into an ice cream shop and there are so many flavors on offer. And so what's the idea here? Ice cream is good, so therefore eat it all. I think most of us know that's not how this works. Ice cream is good. Ice cream shop has lots on offer. Choose a flavor. Come back another time if you want to have a different flavor. Have 2 scoops of different flavors if you're crazy. But you've got to get choosy. And so I think collaboration, teamwork's the same, is get really choosy where you invest this effort in saying, let's design ourselves up for this, because it's going to take some time and effort, and you can't just have it all.
And I think there's I know you put it there deliberately, and I would just want to drag it out again as well, where not everything is teamwork in the sense of what we believe teamwork. And I think there's some work here in defining what teamwork even is. Sometimes, so what I'm trying to say is, sometimes working in a silo is the best teamwork you can do, because it's in service to teams focus on the mission and the flow that happens. And I don't need, as you said, I don't need you in the toilet with me, I'm fine. The CFO, the financial team, whoever, doesn't need the operational team telling them how to do their work. They just need to do their work in service too. And there is a silo, but silos are terrible. No, silos are okay if they're formed the right way to serve, flow, focus, care. They're actually really empowering and enabling. So please, the other thing I see a lot of is people want to kind of do the big smear of collaboration, or the unhealthy version of teamwork becoming, to use a word, just consensus, democracy gone wrong. It's not about that.
Yeah, I've got a job to do. I've got expertise in it. I've got a PD. I've got stakeholders, whatever. I don't need everyone's nose in all of my work. Thank you very much. And it's funny, right? Because then often team meetings are structured as, we go around the table and everyone just gives us an update on what they're working on. And so then they're surprised when people start trying to get their nose into my work. It's like, well, it's because the notion of team was I should put everything on the table. What if instead, and this is a great thing for teams who are sort of thinking, how do I invite collaboration in a much more deliberate and focused way, is what if instead in your team catch-ups, each person put a question on the table? And it's an invitational question. It's a question that actually I'm sitting with at the moment about a piece of my work or a challenge I'm facing. And I just put it there because if anyone has a thought or a perspective on that, I would be really interested to have a conversation. Or if it's a question that you relate to in your work as well, we should put our heads together. And the question could be, how do we deal with declining inbound calls at the moment from prospective customers? Or the question could be, how do we integrate our work into the news database or system in a way that doesn't make life impossibly difficult for us? Or it could be, where's a great place to take the team for their next offsite? I mean, it could be anything, but just start with questions.
Give people the opportunity to be curious.
Yeah.
That's a significant one. And I know, I'm sure all of us will reflect on the first part of that, which is we sit there and give an update on everything. And it goes around the room.
What do I do with that?
Have a great day, everyone.
Now I can go back and do some work.
Yes. Versus, here's something I'm wrestling with. Here's something that's going on in my world. If you've got something like open to any thought, advice, wisdom, or otherwise, this is what I'm wrestling with at the minute. Cool. And it doesn't. And then of course, everyone jumps into rescue. No. Just take it away. Think about it. Let me know if you've got something that can be helpful. I'm really open to it. Thank you.
Because what you also get from that is and this is what you almost want to encourage, is people going, you and I should go and grab a coffee and have a chat about that, because I do have some thoughts about that, but I'm also really curious what your experience has been. And someone else says, actually, can I join you guys? I'd be really interested as well. And that's now happening. We didn't need a meeting. We didn't need a workshop. We didn't even need Post-it notes.
Or a collaboration group thing. Stuff, yes.
An activation.
Yes, it's all these big words, but yes, that's really cool. And I'm mindful that you could get in 1,000 different pathways, and I think you've added huge value, Simon. And I tried my best to keep this to a 1 hour-ish window for people. Otherwise,
I've got no idea what the time is.
It's 11:45 or in your time, 11:45 in your time. Because you are a Southern folk and I am not a Southern folk, because our curtains fade differently to yours. I'm way down in Melbourne. Yes, sunny Brisbane, not so sunny today. So as we head to the end, the last question I ask of people who are generous enough to share their wisdom and their time, and you have done that in spades. If you wanted to leave one thing with people in the sense of, hey, this one thing's the thing that I think matters. Think about this, do something with this. What would that be? And you may have already said it, and that's okay. What's the one thing that the closer? By the way, I didn't warn Simon about this, so now he's having a bit of a think.
I love the question, because it's like, say something good. No pressure at all.
Improv king,
I think, there was definitely something, as soon as you started asking the question, I was thinking, what is that thing? For me, the thing, so I think I might have even said in our conversation, leaders should be open enough to say teaming can be hard, collaboration can be hard. The last thing I would want then is for people to then hear that as so it's all just too hard. No wonder we don't do it. It's hard because we make it hard for ourselves, is what I was really suggesting. And I think the way we have traditionally set up organizations, and there's still, to varying degrees, kind of relics of that in every organization, the extent to which hierarchy actually means that there are really clearly painted lines on the road and I'm supposed to stay in that lane. The extent to which I don't get full visibility of decisions. I don't even have a really clear picture of strategy. That sort of stuff makes teaming hard, but it is up to organizations to fix that and to deal with that. Yeah. But if we now bring it back to a local question, even if you're in an exec team listening to this, it actually, first and foremost, above all, it's a human question. Teaming is a human question. Who are you? Who are we? What do we want to be able to do together? And how can we help each other with that?
Mm.
And let's, as part of that, allow ourselves to talk about how are we actually tripping each other up with that as well. But just stop trying to control the conversation, stop trying to keep it all funneled through, one diagnostic questionnaire. The survey results are presented on the screen, and then we systematically work through that. I mean, those things can be helpful, but fundamentally, make the space for a bunch of humans to sit down, look at each other and go, what do we want to be able to do and how can we do it? And stop trying to control it.
Powerful. I'm sure, yes, thank you. For people, I'm not even going to try to summarize that because that was just gold, Simon. For people who want to get in contact with Simon, we will put his connection details in the show notes. But again, Simon Dowling, look it up, Google it. He's there. He's pretty, he's out there, even if he is going through a website redesign.
There are other Simon Dowlings out there, but yeah,
there's no, there's not. There's only one in my world.
There's a bespoke tailor in the UK that people often ask, is that you? There's an academic who authors a lot of papers whose his profile and mine actually have been merged by Google. So Google is very confused. We have to fix that. Yeah. But yes.
Yes, well there is we'll put the real Simon Dowling, not those other.
The collaborative leadership teaming guy.
Correct, the teaming guy. And I think that's the piece here. It's if you're having questions around this, please reach out and give him a call. Reach out because teaming, one of the other comments that I say a lot to people is, got to slow down to speed up. And this teaming work is all about learning. It's taking the time in the slow down to really speed up. You want to see value. You want to see productivity. You want to see passion and purpose. All those cool words that we talk to, but we like to think we've got hanging around. Doing the kind of work Simon does with your crew in the slowdown, and it is a slow, there's energy and there's effort, but doing that, you will see manifold outcomes that are just beautiful and amazing. But you've got to do a bit of work, but he's the guy that can help you do it.
I call it the whoosh. You
Whoosh.
do these sessions and then suddenly, all of a sudden, you feel in a team, it just goes whoosh, and this energy builds, and watch out, try and stop it.
Like that feeling as the plane just lifts off the tarmac. It's like you feel that, you feel it. You feel that lift. It's that lift. Whoosh and waka waka. Before we go, I have to go back to the waka waka because when you said waka waka, I kind of went, there's a whole generation of people who have no idea what you're talking about there, Fuzzy Bear. So for everyone out there who's still hanging in there with us, Fuzzy Bear.
Waka waka.
There it is.
The Muppet Show we're talking.
Yeah, the Muppet Show, yes.
My kids know who Fuzzy Bear is. I like to think.
If you walk around doing waka waka, of course they do.
Hey, Andrew, this has been
a delight.
Such a great conversation. You're such a generous interviewer. And I think when you do have conversations like this, you know they've been good ones when you walk away. I've written notes because it's just helped me crystallize some of the thinking that I do around this, and I spend all my time in this. But even then, just some of the questions, the way you phrase them, help me go, oh, okay, that's what that's really about. So thank you.
Well, you're welcome, and thank you for your time. And on behalf of everyone who's listening, you delivered gold. Really appreciate it. And for those who are out there, thanks for your time. We deeply appreciate you sharing it with us. And as I said, there'll be stuff about Simon down below in the show notes. Please, if you have any questions, reach out, have that conversation, because he will absolutely make your world rock.
I love hearing from people once they listen to things like this. What stood out for you? What are you interested in? What's a question for you? That might be it.
Don't be shy. And Simon also has his own like LinkedIn and everything. Like, follow the guy. It's not only useful, it's funny. Can't take the improv out of the guy. And it's just a lot of the work Simon does is done in such a light, humid way, but it really hits you. So thank you for your time today, Mr. Dowling, and for everyone listening. Thank you for your energy and effort here too. And we'll wrap it up, and thank you very much. Have a good, whatever it is, whatever time it is, wherever you are. Enjoy the rest of the window that you've got in front of you. Thank you.